I'll never forget the day I first saw her. The elderly woman who walked slowly into the jewelry store, carrying herself with quiet grace, but also a certain weight in her eyes. At first, I thought she was just another customer, but there was something different about her. Something that made me stop and watch even before our paths crossed. I was working behind the counter that afternoon, barely paying attention to the few people browsing. The air felt heavy, almost like it was holding its breath. Then she appeared, hesitating just a moment before stepping inside, as if the place wasn't meant for someone like her. She looked fragile, with soft silver hair and delicate hands. But her eyes told a story I couldn't quite place, a mix of sadness and strength. She moved slowly, as if carrying memories too heavy for words. Something about her felt important, though I didn't know why. The other clerk, the one helping me that day, gave her a quick, dismissive glance. I could see it in her eyes. She thought this old lady didn't belong here, that she was out of place. The air shifted, suddenly thick with an unspoken tension. I wanted to say something, but the words got stuck in my throat. As the woman reached the display case, I noticed her gaze linger on one particular necklace. Not the most expensive or flashy, but something small, delicate, almost like a secret waiting to be uncovered. My heart told me this wasn't just a simple shopping trip. I didn't know her story yet, but I knew it would change everything. The jewelry store was quiet that afternoon, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It felt more like a waiting room filled with hidden judgments. I could hear the faint jingling of the doorbell when she came in, and my heart skipped a beat. There was a tension hanging in the air, one I couldn't ignore. The clerk who was working alongside me barely hid her impatience. At first, it was just a quick eye roll when the elderly woman asked for help. A small dismissive sigh that said more than words ever could. I watched as she leaned on the counter, crossing her arms like she was already bored of this slow, awkward visit. "Are you sure you're looking for jewelry, ma'am? We usually get younger customers in here," she muttered just loud enough for me to hear. The woman didn't flinch. She simply smiled, a small, polite smile that felt like armor. Her voice was soft but steady when she answered, "Yes, I'm looking for something very special. Not just jewelry, but something meaningful." The clerk scoffed quietly, shaking her head as if this was some kind of joke. She started to make thinly veiled remarks about the woman's age, her clothes, her old-fashioned taste. At first it was subtle, little comments under her breath, smirks exchanged between the other employees. But soon it grew louder, more obvious. "Maybe you should come back when you're feeling sprier," she said, with a sharp, mocking tone that cut through the quiet. Still, the elderly woman remained calm. She didn't argue or raise her voice. Instead, she held herself with quiet dignity, like she was used to weathering storms much worse than this. I could see her hands gripping the edge of the glass case, not trembling, but steady, strong. The room felt heavier with every second. It was like watching two worlds collide. The impatient, judgmental youth against the composed, unshakable strength of age. And I knew, even then, that this wasn't just about jewelry. After a few moments of silence, the elderly woman finally spoke, her voice calm but carrying a quiet strength that made the room shift once again. "I'm looking for a necklace," she said, "something that carries a memory, something that means more than just gold or diamonds." Her words hung in the air, soft but heavy, as if they held secrets too deep to explain easily. I found myself leaning closer, wanting to understand what was behind those careful phrases. The clerk rolled her eyes again, clearly unimpressed. "You're wasting your time," she said, loud enough for the woman and me to hear. "We don't have anything old-fashioned like that here. Maybe you should try a thrift store." I felt a sudden rush of anger at the clerk's harsh tone, but the elderly woman stayed composed. She smiled politely, the kind of smile that comes from knowing a battle is worth fighting quietly. "I'm not looking for something old-fashioned," the woman replied softly. "I'm searching for something very personal, something to remember a life lived, a story told." I glanced between them. The clerk was smirking now, her expression dripping with disbelief, clearly thinking this was just some silly old woman's fantasy. But the woman's eyes held something else, depth, history, and a hint of sorrow. "I used to come here years ago," the elderly woman continued, her voice steady but with a touch of nostalgia. before life took me on a path I never expected. Back then, this store was part of a chapter I hoped to never forget. The clerk snorted, shaking her head. What, you want us to feel sorry for you? Maybe your wrinkled hands aren't meant for jewelry anymore. The room grew colder. I could feel the weight of those words like a punch, but the elderly woman didn't flinch. Instead, she looked straight at the clerk with a steady gaze. I'm here for something that reminds me of hope, she said simply. Of family, of love. The clerk scoffed again, dismissing the idea like it was foolish. Hope, family, sounds like you're stuck in the past. Maybe it's time to move on. That struck a nerve, but the elderly woman's calm didn't break. There was a quiet strength in her silence, a story waiting to be told, but only when the time was right. I could tell there was more beneath the surface, more pain, more memories, but the woman wasn't ready to share everything. Instead, she looked at me, and for the first time I saw something almost like a plea. A request for understanding in a world that seemed to have forgotten how to respect its elders. The clerk, meanwhile, was growing impatient and openly mocking now, making rude comments about the woman's age, her appearance, and even her irrelevant taste in jewelry. I wanted to speak up, but something told me to wait. Something told me this story wasn't finished yet, because behind the calm exterior of this elderly woman was a secret, a truth that would turn this day upside down. The clerk's mocking words hung in the air like a challenge. I expected the elderly woman to shrink away, maybe offer a meek apology or simply leave. But what happened next caught me completely off guard. She straightened up, her voice steady and clear, as if she'd been waiting for this moment all along. You think you can judge me because of my age, because of how I look? That says far more about you than it does about me. The clerk blinked, surprised by the sudden strength in those gentle words. She opened her mouth to respond, but hesitated, unsure. The elderly woman continued, her tone calm but firm. I've lived through times that tested me, times when people dismissed me, just like you're doing now. But I didn't let their ignorance define me. I watched the clerk's face change, first confusion, then a flicker of doubt. Her usual smug expression faltered for just a moment. She shifted uncomfortably, trying to hide it behind a forced smile. Perhaps, the woman said, lowering her voice, you don't realize who you're speaking to. I wasn't always just a quiet lady, looking for a necklace. Her eyes held mine, and I felt the weight of unspoken stories behind them. I've faced battles you couldn't imagine. I've raised a son who changed the world, someone whose name you've surely heard. The clerk's smile disappeared completely, replaced by a flicker of panic. She glanced nervously toward the door, then back at the woman, as if suddenly questioning everything she thought she knew. For a moment the room felt charged with electricity. The power dynamic had shifted, and the clerk wasn't sure how to respond. The elderly woman's calm confidence filled the space, like she was in control of a secret that would change everything. And just like that, I realized this was no ordinary shopper. There was so much more to her story, more than anyone in that store could guess. The room held its breath as the elderly woman's voice dropped to a calm, almost gentle tone. My son, she said, is someone you've probably heard of, someone whose name carries weight far beyond this little store. The clerk's eyes flicked up sharply, her smug expression cracking just a little. Who? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady, but there was a sharp edge of nervousness beneath it. The woman smiled faintly, the kind of smile that only comes from knowing the truth, from having seen the world change around you. His name is Daniel Hartman. The clerk froze. It was as if the air had suddenly shifted, thickened with disbelief. I saw her swallow hard, the color draining from her face. Daniel Hartman, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. You mean the Daniel Hartman? The one who started Hartman Global, the billionaire philanthropist. The elderly woman nodded slowly. Yes, that's my son. For a moment no one spoke. The clerk's face twisted with embarrassment. She had been so quick to mock, to belittle, and now she was faced with the harsh reality that the woman she had treated with disrespect was the mother of a man admired and feared by many. I could see the panic rising in her eyes. She glanced nervously around the store, hoping no one else had overheard. But the damage was done. In that instant, the clerk's bravado crumbled. She suddenly realized she had insulted someone important, Not just any customer, but the mother of a man who had changed industries, donated millions to charity, and inspired thousands. Her mind raced. How could she have been so careless? How could she have let her arrogance get the better of her? I watched as she took a small step back, her tone lowering into something closer to apology. "I didn't know," she stammered, avoiding the woman's steady gaze. But the elderly woman didn't give her the satisfaction of anger or revenge. Instead, she smiled with quiet grace, the kind of grace that comes from a lifetime of experience, from knowing that dignity is more powerful than bitterness. "It's all right," she said softly. "I understand that not everyone knows my story, but what I hope people do know is that kindness matters. Respect matters, not because of who I am, but because it's the right thing to do." The clerk nodded, shame coloring her cheeks. "I'm sorry for how I spoke to you." The elderly woman gave a small nod, her eyes never leaving the clerk's face. "Thank you." In that moment, I realized something important. Power isn't always about wealth or fame. Sometimes, it's about the quiet strength to hold your head high, to forgive, and to remind others of what truly matters. The woman went on to explain. She was in the store searching for a necklace to mark a special occasion, a gift for her son, a symbol of their unbreakable bond. Her story had layers of love, loss, and hope. But more than that, it was a reminder that every person deserves respect, no matter their age or appearance. As I watched the clerk quietly step aside to help her, I felt a deep respect for that elderly woman, a woman who had weathered storms I could only imagine, and who still carried herself with unmatched dignity. And I knew that this day, this encounter, would stay with me forever. After the revelation, the atmosphere in the store shifted completely. The clerk's usual confident stance gave way to awkwardness. She fidgeted behind the counter, avoiding eye contact, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I want to apologize," she finally said, her voice small and uncertain. "I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. It was rude, and I didn't know who you were." The elderly woman studied her for a moment, her expression softening but still steady. "Thank you," she replied calmly. "It means a lot to hear that." For a moment it seemed like the tension might dissolve, but then, as if the weight of the earlier moments settled back on her shoulders, the woman hesitated. She looked around the store, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the glass case. "I was thinking of leaving," she admitted quietly, "after how I was treated, but I realize now that I should stay. This necklace is important to me, more than just a gift. It's a reminder of who we are." The clerk nodded, now fully aware of the mistake she had made. She moved aside, and began helping the woman find exactly what she wanted. The rest of the store quieted, as if waiting for the moment to pass. Watching them, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had just happened. It was a harsh reminder of how quickly we can judge others based on appearances, age, clothes, or mannerisms, without knowing their true story. The clerk's attitude had been shaped by assumptions and impatience. She had thought the elderly woman was just another customer, someone irrelevant or out of place. But in reality she was a woman of deep dignity, intelligence, and experience. That contrast was a powerful lesson. Respect and kindness are not just polite gestures, they are the foundation of how we treat every person we meet, no matter their age, background, or status. The elderly woman showed incredible humility and grace throughout the entire encounter. She didn't lash out or hold grudges. Instead, she stood firm in her truth, and reminded us all of the value of compassion. As I watched her complete the purchase, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lesson she had quietly taught us, that dignity isn't given by others, it's carried within, and humility isn't weakness, it's strength. It takes courage to respond to cruelty with kindness. That day, I realized how important it is to pause before we judge, to look beyond the surface, and to treat everyone with the respect they deserve. Because sometimes, the quietest people carry the most powerful stories. As the door closed softly behind the elderly woman, I felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me: respect, sadness, hope, and a quiet gratitude. That day in the jewelry store wasn't just about a necklace or a chance encounter. It was a lesson, one I knew I would carry with me for the rest of my life. Watching her face the clerk's mockery with such calm confidence made me realize just how much strength can be hidden beneath a gentle exterior. She didn't need to raise her voice or demand respect. Instead, she showed the kind of power that comes from a lifetime of experience. A power rooted in kindness, dignity, and patience. I thought about her story, her famous son, yes, but even more about her. Not just as the mother of someone well known, but as a woman who had lived through pain, joy, and challenges most of us can only imagine. A woman who carried her history quietly but never allowed it to break her spirit. It made me question how often I, and probably many others, judge people by what we see on the surface. How quick we are to write off someone, because they don't fit our expectations or our ideas of who they should be. That day, I saw the danger in that kind of thinking, the damage it causes, not just to others, but to ourselves. The clerk's mistake was a harsh reminder that disrespect and assumptions come easily, but kindness and understanding require effort. It takes courage to look beyond age, appearance, or status, and to see the person beneath, their story, their struggles, their worth. And the elderly woman's grace, throughout it all, taught me something even more profound. Forgiveness and humility don't show weakness. They reveal the true strength of the human spirit. Here's the twist. After she left, I found out from a colleague that the necklace she chose wasn't just a gift. It was meant to mark the anniversary of a very personal family moment, one that symbolized hope and healing. It wasn't about wealth or fame. It was about love, memory, and moving forward. That simple truth stayed with me. So if there's one thing I want you to remember from this story, it's this: never judge someone by their age, their looks, or the way they carry themselves. Everyone has a story, a life full of hidden depths, strength, and meaning. Sometimes the quietest, oldest faces hold the greatest wisdom, and sometimes the most unexpected people teach us the most important lessons. We all deserve kindness, respect, and a chance to be seen for who we truly are. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you in any way, please like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that remind us all about the power of empathy and understanding. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need a little reminder about kindness today. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, and subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a moment where kindness or respect changed everything? Share your stories and feelings in the comments below. And if you know someone who could use a reminder about the power of empathy and understanding, please share this video with them. Together we can spread kindness and make the world a little gentler, one story at a time.